Hey Jack, how are you?
Great.
Right. Trying to get all this together. By some chance, Jack, do you use an iPhone?
I do.
Um, with the next release, they're going to make it so you can use your iPhone as a webcam really easily.
Oh
With a
yeah.
whole bunch of features, including even when you just have it pointed at you like a typical webcam, it has the ability to look straight down on your desktop. So if you want to show something on your desk, it creates a split screen and allows both to happen at the same time, which I think is pretty cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've just been amazed at all these, all this content that's being produced online for social media and others, and it's all on phones.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, like I'm not sure what they cost now. I have an iPhone 12 Max, Pro Max, and I think it was around $1,000. I'm not sure, quite 100% sure, but that's actually fairly expensive for a computer these days. You can get a lot of computers for $500, $600. So
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of technology in that phone that's not trivial, particularly the camera. Um, I have two friends that are both very well-known national quality photographers, mostly nature-related stuff, and they both have gone just to their phones.
Yeah.
And these guys in their 70s have been doing this for 40 or 50 years. And they said that while there's a few little trade-offs, in general, the best camera is the one you have with you.
Yeah.
So some of these old Cadre types are switching to the phone as well, which, I don't know. It's interesting. I keep waiting for the model where you basically implant it in your forehead, and then you don't have to constantly go, where the hell's my phone? It'll be right there in your forehead, or maybe in a hat that you wear, with the logo or something. That might work. I don't know.
Yeah. There's an very old joke about implanting technology into your body, and
Yeah.
guys on the golf course, and he starts ringing, and he picks up he puts his hands with his up to his face, and his thumb is the receiver, and his pinky is the speaker, and he starts talking and explains everything. Goes through a couple of other examples, and then they hear this weird noise, and he steps off to the side, drops his pants and squats, and his facts coming in.
Oh, Jesus Christ. I've not seen that one. I think there are some, I'm not 100% sure of this, but I believe there's some um, diabetes and related implants that you get in your body I think it's related to blood sugar or something like that. And I believe they have that. Maybe it's just being discussed, but I believe it communicates wirelessly with your phone, so it can tell you what's going on without having to draw blood or whatever. And so it's pretty interesting. And one of the things that I was involved in a project a while ago was a healthcare company out of New York I was doing some work with, and they had developed the ability to have a doctor's appointment by text on your phone. So you didn't have to go live. You didn't have to talk on the phone. You had a back and forth text with a doctor. And it's been an unbelievable success. And they're really focused on young people who are very comfortable with that. But one of the things I really liked about it, and I wasn't successful really getting it where I wanted, but it doesn't require internet access to work. So even in rural areas that don't have broadband, you can still text. In most, almost very few places don't have text. And so I thought that was really a cool use of a phone. You know, and what their goal was, they weren't trying to replace doctors. They're basically trying to become a gateway to treatment. So by making it so easy to connect with them, they could then refer you if you needed something. If it was something minor, then that doctor could even do prescriptions by text. But the idea was really to change this process of getting a doctor's appointment, especially in a rural area, and waiting in an office or my doctor here in Pink Hill, he's the only doctor in Pink Hill. If I were just to call right now, I probably couldn't get an appointment before September because he's so busy, you know, so anyway. Hey, Dawn, how are you?
I'm doing good. How are y'all doing?
Doing good. I don't see how you have time to talk to us. You've got about 50 things on your to-do list from your.
It's exciting though. I have spent a lot of time curating my boxes, so I would love some feedback when I get them close, if y'all don't mind.
Well, I have to say my work here is done. You know why? Because
Wow.
Dawn just said the kind of word that you want to say to a venture capital or any outside investor. I am curating my boxes. I cannot tell you what a great line that is. And even though I personally think of curation as a museum, that is kind of the hip way to describe, you know, working on your stuff, curating your.
Well,
your
I hope it's going to be a work of art when I'm finished. So
okay.
we'll
All right.
see.
Well, good. Yeah. So, hey, Ashley, how are you today?
I'm doing really well. How are you?
I'm good. I did want to ask you, since Sana's not here, about your pop-up market last Friday night in Raleigh.
Yeah, that went really well. We estimated 2,000 in attendance.
That's incredible. How many vendors did you have?
We had 31 vendors, 2 food trucks, a nonprofit, and music, live
And a
music.
partridge in a pear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know, I was just going to suggest to you guys that you might consider going live during one of those, even just for a short time.
Yeah.
I think that would that you could use that in your social media and stuff, particularly maybe if you interview one of the food trucks or one of the other vendors, or even yourself. You know, have Sana
Absolutely.
and you do an interview. I think that's a chance to really build your. Plus, it's a great footage with downtown Raleigh and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. She actually did talk to every vendor and made a reel for each of them, and is starting to post them. So they turned out great. And yeah, going live is a really good idea. So thank you for that.
Good, good. Well, I'll be sure to watch that. You know, I don't have time for anything else but watching, you know, reels and TikTok is kind of. My wife goes, "What is that you are doing?" You know, she might hear sounds of a sporting event. It might be someone giving a speech. Might be someone blowing up something. You know, it's multi versions of content all day long. So, well, welcome everybody. Today we're going to go through, you know, a subject that most people don't like to talk about, particularly in entrepreneurship circles where the entrepreneurs are considered, you know, superhuman or whatever. They don't have the ability or the right to have emotional issues or mental health issues. So it is kind of a touchy subject, but we're going to hear from 4 entrepreneurs in video from Techstars. I do want to share a story with you, and I to this day I had not figured out this guy's name, but I was participating in a Zoom meeting with the UNC Chapel Hill Keenan Flagler. I don't know if it was the business school or the entrepreneurship or whatever, but they had a guy on there who was the guest speaker, and he had sold his company pretty recently for $348 million, which to me is a lot of money. And but what he shared with the group, I have never heard before in my life. He was so depressed when he got the text or the notice that the transaction had closed. He could not get off his living room floor. He couldn't leave his house. He was so incredibly depressed for a whole bunch of unrelated reasons and related reasons. But can you imagine you just made $300 some odd million and you're so depressed you don't care. So that really struck home with me. And so I started reaching out a little bit to my friends, some of my friends that are actually venture capital guys, and one in particular is very well known and very successful venture capital guy. And when I told him about it, he goes, "Oh yeah, that's common." I'm like, "What?" He goes, "Yeah, it's a really unspoken issue. People think because somebody made, X amount of money that, they're all, everything's fine and perfect, but that isn't how it works." If anybody here or of anybody who is struggling with these kinds of issues, I think you should make an effort to help them, connect them with resources. And I'm not even sure, it depends on your area, what's what. But we're gonna hear the story of 4 of these entrepreneurs. It's not super long, but I think it's compelling. So just hang on here and see if we can't do this. Everyone can see that, right?
Yep,
Okay.
looks good.
Looks good. The first guy here is actually the founder of Techstars, a guy named Brad Feld. And Brad is a really cool guy. I have met him. I can't say that I know him, but I have met him. He's very different. He's very chill from my perspective compared to a lot of the people in this kind of space. So hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Well, I would say I was a pretty typical sort of nerdy, precocious kid. I grew up in Dallas, Texas. My dad's a doctor, my mom's an artist. Right, there was a sense of being successful was important, and education was important, learning was important. I had a pretty deep introvert streak, so I was very comfortable externally. I was very social and had plenty of friends and, hung out and did things. But I really liked being alone reading a book. When I graduated from high school, I went from Dallas to Boston, and I went to school at MIT.
I think one of the really beautiful things about being friends first is you build this level of trust. We really knew each other and knew each other in different contexts.
I knew her well as a friend, and I found her fascinating intellectually. She was, incredibly smart, but also across a very wide range of things.
One of the things that I remember so much about college was he worked harder than anybody. And at MIT, that's saying a lot because everybody's really achievement-oriented. Everybody was the valedictorian of their class. Everybody had perfect SAT scores, and he still took twice the course load of the required course load and trained for a marathon and just really worked really, really hard, and I admired that. I admire a work ethic. So when you're friends and you admire a work ethic, that's one thing, and then in a relationship that can get to be too extreme. And we would bill 100-hour work weeks, which meant that all the administrative time and all the sleeping time wasn't on that, but it was extreme. That was extreme.
On today's fundraising segment, we have Brad Feld.
Brad Feld.
Brad Feld, the man who does not need an introduction.
We were very successful as a business, financially very successful. Anybody on the outside looking in would say, what's wrong with you? Like you live in Boulder, Colorado, you got, nice house, you got a nice car, you got a great wife. It's easy to describe it at one level and hard at another. So the feeling for me of depression starts with what I could only describe as kind of a hole in my gut. It wasn't that I felt an emotion that was a negative emotion. I didn't feel sadness or sorrow, but it was almost the absence of joy. It's like I've got this thing missing. I want this essential element of existence I don't have in my current existence. And I'm worried I'm not going to have it again.
The real crisis moment was we were on vacation in Sedona, Arizona, and he was driving the rental car, and he said he was considering pulling into oncoming traffic. So a really serious suicidal ideation. And I made him stop the car, and we traded places, and I said, I know some things, and I've studied some things, and I've done some therapy, and I've done a lot of work, but this is way out of my league. And when we get back to Boston, you're gonna get professional help.
I remember feeling periods of incredible anxiety, and I had incredible shame around the idea that I would see a psychiatrist, and incredible shame around the idea that I would take medication, incredible shame around the idea that I might actually acknowledge that I was depressed. And there were very few people that I could talk to about this. Fortunately, I could talk to Amy about it. I could talk to my business partner, Dave, who was, even though he didn't really know what to do with it at the time, was incredible in terms of just being a supportive friend and partner. And what Dave would do is he wouldn't say to me, do you want to go for a walk? He would find out when I had a free hour on my calendar. He'd poke his head in my office and say, let's go for a walk. And I'd look at my calendar, I'd see I had an hour available. I'd be like, great. And we'd go for a walk. And a lot of times we wouldn't even talk about anything. He wouldn't start a conversation. We'd just walk. And sometimes a conversation would emerge, and sometimes I'd start to talk about something, and he'd build off of it. But he didn't make the walk, he didn't make the hour that we'd do a loop be about me or fixing me or how am I doing or what do I need. It could turn into that, and sometimes it did, and sometimes we just walked for an hour. Even when I was in a really low point, it was an introduction and a reminder to me of something that might be good, right? That might feel like joy against this touch point. And so doing simple things like that are very powerful.
You have to take care of yourself as well. It's the put on your own oxygen mask first. And that's my friends, being outside in nature, watching the sunrise with my dogs, just really intense self-care. It's a gift for me to be strong and happy, even when he's really depressed. I think my path is to be a truth teller, and Brad is a truth teller. Trust the journey. It's gonna turn out okay. It's gonna turn out great, actually.
Wow.
Y me encontré con mi negra, que estaba bien re solita. Le dije al mundo, mi hija, no sabes cuánto la quiero. Yo soy un guapo sincero, que su amor le solicita. Por eso tan solo espero el sí de su...
I've never been one to follow the same path as everybody else. I was always known as like the wild one. Ball of energy, a little sassy. I'm not afraid to take risks. In fact, I probably chase those types of adventures. So I'm originally from Colombia, South America, and I actually moved to the US when I was 6 years old. My whole family and I migrated here. My childhood's a little bit different because I grew up in a very different social class, I would say, as well. My parents just wanted a better life for us. The reason we moved to the US was actually for safety and security reasons. My grandmother was actually kidnapped when I was 5, and we spent about 8 months trying to get her back. We went a whole month actually before we knew where she was. And that was kind of the last straw for my dad and my family, as we needed to move, and it was really a matter of like having a better, brighter future. All of my siblings and I felt this feeling of we had to make our dad proud and make our mom proud, just because of everything they'd been through and everything that they had put themselves through just so that we could have a better life. Even since high school, like I was always the type of person that would stay up all night and study for tests because I had to get a good grade and make dad proud and all of that. When I moved to Denver, I met Kevin. We actually met at a bar. The first thing that really stood out to me was just how kind and generous he is. Truthfully, I fell in love with his heart first.
I remember hearing that she was going on a camping trip with my friends, and I had just met her a few weeks before. And so I packed up all my things real fast and dropped what I was doing on Saturday just to go on this camping trip to see her. She didn't have a backpack, and she was just carrying everything in her arms. But she did it with a smile, and she was laughing the whole time. Like, wow, this person is willing to do new things, even if they're beyond her comfort zone.
Kevin was there from day one. Everything really happened super fast. Like within that first year, I had met Kevin and I had met Jackie, who ended up being the co-founder at Revelar. People should have the right to feel safe. And with Revelar, you are now empowered to live your life to its fullest potential. At the time, it was just the two of us working on it, and we were kind of figuring it out from scratch. We were solely driven by passion, right? So we were, in our minds, like creating a product that, for lack of a better word, was supposed to save the world, right? Like, how do we keep people safe? We had people write in and tell us how important our product was, and I think that just made us fight harder, but also that led to a lot more stress. Yeah, there was a lot of pressure to not let people down. You know, there was definitely a lot of great things that came from it, but it did feel like I was a little bit like suffocating myself in a way. It felt like I had to keep going, like trapped a little bit. Sorry, you just made me like tear up. Sorry, you're right, I haven't processed. It's been still really hard. You know, I did lose friendships. I lost a lot of time that I could have had with people. But in that moment, I completely had prioritized the company and the mission and everything we stood for. And a lot of people say, right, like, don't take it so personally, but it's super hard because you just given so much to that company. So my co-founder was actually really good at it. She would look at me and be like, you're sick or you're tired, like go home, take a half day, like go rest, like go take care of yourself. But a lot of times, like, it's hard to catch those moments for yourself.
The work world started bleeding into the home life. I would say I felt very alone. All you really want to do is see the person you love, but you also know that that person is trying to start a business, save that business, save jobs. I just knew I hadn't seen Andrea, the real person inside of there, for quite a bit of time. That person had been sucked into the laptop.
And my husband actually looked at me and he closed my computer and he was like, you need to go to bed. Like, you look exhausted. You look like you're not well. And that was a pretty big wake-up call for me, right? Like, do I need to work this late? Like, how can I be with you if I'm not with you? In a lot of situations, I was there physically, but mentally, my head was always somewhere else.
We know we're supposed to take care of ourselves. We know we're supposed to work out. We know we're supposed to eat healthy. We know we're supposed to go on walks, do art. But it simply felt like there was never time to do those things because we would be letting someone down if we took time for ourselves.
Starting a company is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. you know, make sure that it's something that you're passionate about. You still get stressed out, right? Like, it's life. Life is meant to be a little stressful. That's how you become a better person and how you get to know yourself better. When I compare myself to how I feel now versus back then, I was definitely overworked, overstressed. I've learned that now, right? Like how important it is to actually spend time with the things that matter the most to you, so you can continue to be your authentic self without letting stress and burnout take over.
Just take a second here to really discuss either one of these two videos, and if anyone, if it resonated or you could relate to it, or anything you might want to say about it, I'd be curious. Okay.
Dennis, this is Allison. I think I'm glad.
Hey, Allison.
Hey, it just hit me. It was like, wow, a lot of us, and me included, have those habits. We feel like we have to do so much more than everybody else because it's our responsibility. And I think we probably all need to see that these people that reach the top have problems. I mean, and it's okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. Anyone else want to comment? Well, I'll just share a little bit about some experiences I had. So my first kind of career or business was I worked with CEOs and boards of directors of large public companies, setting up what were called golden parachutes and other types of programs, particularly for banks and utility were my main customers. But at the time, I was 23 years old, and I grew up in a place, a neighborhood, a life, my family, where I did not know a male that wore a tie to work. I will call it blue collar, probably even below blue collar in many respects. So I was exposed to these board meetings and meetings with executives, some who are pretty famous at this point or now. And for me, it was amazing. I just couldn't get over it. But as I continued in this business, I developed a particular kind of expertise that for some reason people thought I was the only one who could do this particular thing. So I started getting a lot of inbound requests to meet with CEOs on an individual one-to-one basis. This was not a meeting with their team. And MCI, who some of you might remember, was kind of the first competitive telephone company to AT&T. In fact, they used to call MCI the law firm with antennas on its roof, because they basically would sue AT&T every single day. So I got a call from, and I had worked with them at a relatively low level, but I got a call from their vice president of human resources, who had been at Goodyear and was a very sophisticated, big time kind of executive in many, many ways. And he said that the CEO would like to meet with me, had heard the work I was doing, and was I available to come meet with this guy. And it was one of these things where, it's kind of, I don't want to over exaggerate, but it's kind of like Zeus calling you to a meeting, right? It's at that level. Nobody got meetings with this guy, and he never talked to anybody. So I went up there, I went to MCI's headquarters, and I got in the elevator with the HR guy, who again was a very impressive senior executive kind of guy. We went up to the 12th floor of this office building in downtown DC, and the elevator door opened, and I of course waited for John to kind of go. I didn't know where I was going, right? And he just sat there and looked at me with his finger on the button holding the door open. He goes, "I'm not getting off on this floor. You're getting off on this floor. It is the first door down on the right." Hold on one second, sorry. I walk into this room, I walk down the hall, and it looks like something from Versailles or Henry VIII or something. It's this incredible room that I think I don't know how big it was, one of the biggest rooms I've ever been in. Certainly a room big enough for a full board of directors and then some. And there was a table that went from one end to the other, and it was highly polished and just, unbelievable. And this guy was sitting at the other end. I could barely see him. And he just nodded that I was to sit at the other end from him. So and we're the only two people in the room. Anyway, to make a long story short, the guy turned out to be like one of my Irish uncles. He was warm, he was engaging. He said he can't talk to anybody because everybody wants something from him. And could I help him figure out how to get some money to his sister, who was a nurse, or rather a nun, who wanted to retire? And did I have any fancy way that I could help him do that? That's what he wanted to talk about. But he went into a lot of other things. And I realized for the first time that many of these people, and this was reconfirmed many, many times over my career, these folks are really having troubles in a lot of parts of their life. A lot of them have terrible family, home lives. Some of them, their businesses are in trouble, all of the things. So my illusion about this particular guy, McGowan Communications, it was the name of the company, was just blown away. And, it turned out that this was an extremely common thing that I would run into, is this incredible isolation and detachment from any kind of real life. At least that's the way they played it. And so, that kind of opened my eyes to that whole arena of growing up kind of a blue collar kid, that, as long as you have lots of money, everything will be fine. That's kind of the mantra for a lot of folks from my background. And I found out that, as McGowan said, he goes, you're going to find out it's way worse when you have a lot of money and you still feel like shit. And so I thought that was very insightful and a little discouraging for a 24-year-old kid. You're like, oh, you mean if I make a bunch of money, it's still going to suck? So anyway, this whole series is very near and dear to my heart, because I saw a lot of it. I actually had, I just had a lot of weird stuff happen. Just the last story, I had a client who was the president of a major university. That you have heard of this university, I promise. The police came to his office at 2 a.m. because he was sitting on the floor under his desk making sexual phone calls to people and trying to hide his voice and pretend it wasn't him. And this guy was extremely high profile, but that's what he did at night. He sat under his desk with no clothes on and called people, saying sexual things over the phone. That was kind of, I can't forget, they used to have a name for that. I can't remember what it was, but that's what this guy did, right? So again, just another example that it's, life is hard, and everybody is dealing with something. Anybody, any reaction? Anybody want to cover this? So I got 2 more little short videos to watch. Okay. Well, I hope none of you have to deal with a client who sits under his desk naked calling people. That's a good thing if you don't have to do that. So here we go.
Here goes Maddie. Hi, man.
What's going on? I was born March 2nd, 1975 in Sioux City, Iowa. I was kind of a happy-go-lucky kid. And then my dad left. And after that, I started to get more quiet, more shy, and that kind of followed me throughout my childhood. So middle school, the anxiety really ratcheted up. There were fights daily, and I had kind of this disposition of, when I saw violence, it would make me sick to my stomach. I survived middle school, and made it to high school and started to come a little bit more out of my shell and break out of the anxiety a little bit. I was heavily involved in things like band. I did start to play soccer, so I played on the high school soccer team. Yeah, music was kind of my thing. So we had different garage bands. I played bass because nobody else played bass. Everyone wanted to be a drummer or a guitar player, and I was like, oh, I can get a lot of playing time if I'm a bass player. Things really started to change for me, though, when I got to college.
And that's where I met Matt, was on the first day of college. We were in a small orientation group.
We were supposed to go around, use an alliterative term to introduce ourselves.
So I said, I don't know, I'm Jumpin' Janie, I guess. Even though I'm like super shy.
I couldn't quite see her. She was kind of hidden behind some other people. It got to me and I couldn't come up with anything, so I said, I'm Measly Matt.
And I'm like, who's that?
You know, we were supposed to say something that we were into, and so I said, I'd like to do art. And so I see this head poke around another person and say, what kind of art do you do?
And he said, oh, you wouldn't understand. I thought, like, this is so on, buddy.
Like my 18-year-old self, I just want to go back and smack him. Luckily, I didn't ruin it.
It was really like I met my best friend, and we both felt like we had been searching for this person the last 18 years of our life. About a year and a half later is when we got married.
She is strong beyond belief. She is so incredibly compassionate. You know, if love was a currency, she'd be one of the richest people on the planet.
4 years into our marriage, I think it was, he started to withdraw. He no longer wanted to do anything, wanted to sleep. He started to self-medicate with alcohol.
So the anxiety got to the point where, you know, I was afraid to go places. You know, I'd say to Janie, oh, let's just stay in.
He started doing kind of like ritualistic things, locking the door differently, turning the water on and off.
The anxiety would kind of kick in, and then I would do a ritual to try to combat the anxiety. And it would work, but it was a temporary fix. Then when I was 25, I decided I wanted to get over my fear of heights, so I was going to go skydiving. The day of our jump, I'm super excited. I was playing music on my headphones, and I couldn't wait to jump. And we get to about 3,300 feet, and the instructor opens the door, and I'm the first one to jump. So I look out, and I look down at the ground, and think, there is no way I can do this. This terror came over me. As soon as I let go, my heart felt like it was going to explode, and I couldn't breathe. What I didn't know was I was having a panic attack while skydiving. Then about a week later, I'm at work, and I'm talking to one of my coworkers, and out of the blue, I have a panic attack. It feels exactly how I felt jumping out of the plane. I'm starting to notice I'm having at least one panic attack a week. And it gets to the point where I'm starting to have a panic attack a day. Then I'm having multiple panic attacks every day. My obsessive compulsive disorder gets really out of control because one is kind of feeding the other. So I'm developing more rituals. I notice, you know, like I can't get out of the shower unless I turn the knob off a certain way.
He didn't share a lot with me. He was very withdrawn, but he did share that he was like having some thoughts that were very concerning to him.
So what my brain would tell me to do is very violent things. And me being just who I am, someone who hates violence, it was probably the most disturbing thing for me. So 2 weeks before my 27th birthday, Janie comes to me and says, I'm pregnant. And then I really start to spiral out of control.
The day I told Matt, I guess I just imagined he would scoop me up and spin me around, and it would be this super amazing time, like super special moment for us, and it wasn't. And I think that's the first time I realized there's something really wrong.
I wake up the next day. I shouldn't have gone to work, but I did. I drove myself there. I sat down at my desk, and it was a Friday, and a lot of people were coming with, you know, where are my projects? How, you know, is this going to be done next week? I was a graphic designer at the time. And I just stood up, turned around, and looked at my boss and said, I need to leave right now or I'm going to hurt someone. And she just gave me this blank stare. And she said, okay. So I walk out of the building and I call Janie and I said, I need you to meet me at the hospital.
He seemed really kind of numb and like a shell of himself. I really thought that they would take him away and he would never come back the same guy. But it was also like the best day of our lives because he was given a new chance.
The doctor who was there at the time said, we're going to put you on the right medication and we're going to monitor you the next few days. You're not going to spend the rest of your life here. You're going to get better. And that's the first time I had hope in a very long time. That alone was a huge weight that was lifted off of my shoulders. And 3 days later, I walked out of the hospital.
He was completely different the next day. He woke up with hope. There was like sparkle in his eyes that he hadn't had in years. He looked alive again.
So after the hospitalization, they set you up with a therapist and a psychiatrist. So mindfulness became a big part of how I got healthy because through the act of meditation, sitting on a cushion, I could actually watch my thoughts. And through that process, I understood that my thoughts are not who I am. But if you just watch them passively and become an observer, they don't take control over you.
I got to witness firsthand all those layers he had been putting on himself to protect himself were starting to come off. He was cracking open and the light was shining out. And it was just really amazing.
It fundamentally changed who I am for the better. There is a stigma around mental illness, and we need to break that stigma. We need to understand, all of us together, that it's no different than having any other medical condition. It'll still bubble up. There's moments 17 years later that I still have anxiety, especially before I'm to go on stage and give a speech. But I've learned that I can channel that energy. I can change it from one of fear to one of excitement, because they're kind of the same. One of the most powerful gifts you can give to yourself is to get healthy, and it's okay to ask for help.
I'm Dr. George Iliopoulos. I'm a psychiatrist.
Hi, my name's Jean Ross Marin. I'm a licensed psychologist.
My name is Janine Dianabal. I'm a psychologist. Entrepreneurs obviously are in a very kind of high-achieving, pressure-filled world.
And they do a fair amount of self-neglect sometimes when they're in the middle of all of that. And they keep plowing forward. They don't want to admit that there's something wrong going on.
Sometimes that's great because it inspires creativity and innovation, but sometimes it can lead to a tremendous amount of psychological stress that can accumulate and also lead to burnout. Burnout is related to anxiety and depression, but different. I think burnout is usually related to the workplace specifically, where there is this demand for work to produce, and resources kind of don't always meet the demand to be able to execute the product. So one can constantly feel behind, right? That's the essence of burnout. Now, a side effect of that burnout then, that's feeling like I can't keep up, can then be anxiety and depression. So it can kind of stem from the burnout.
There's a list of the top 5 reasons for disability. Depression is in the top 5. And, so that's right along with heart disease and diabetes. So this is a major cause of disability. 1 in 10 people will have depression in the past year, and the lifetime prevalence might be more like 20%. So 20% of people, 1 in 5, might have a major depression at some point in their life. So it's fairly common.
18.1% of adults have an anxiety disorder, and actually 33% of youth, so from ages 12 to 18, also have an anxiety disorder.
Stress and burnout can impact all areas of life. Some of the earliest signs are very kind of subtle, innocuous things like difficulty sleeping. And that could get normalized because many of us have difficulty sleeping at different times. But when it is chronic, pervasive, that is certainly a sign. Distracted or unable to really focus and concentrate to drive tasks to execution. Difficulty in interpersonal relationships. A lack of ease or even joy in relationships that maybe was present before.
In a depressive episode, you have, for a significant period of time, a depressed mood. You're sad, you're down in the dumps, you're irritable, you're anxious. And a big feature in depression is a word called anhedonia. Anhedonia is an inability to experience pleasure. And that's, hedonism is pleasure, anhedonia is without pleasure. And that's an important thing that humans need. It's what drives us forward, helps us to make decisions, go towards goals. And if nothing feels good, it can be really hard to push yourself forward. Depression can also be associated with difficulty with proper nutrition and eating. And some people just stop eating and lose a significant amount of weight. They'll complain about things like, I can't concentrate. I don't have the energy level that I used to have. Definitely a tendency to be really self-deprecating. I'm no good. I'm worthless. I can't do this. I might as well give up. Things like that can come up.
The difference between normal stress and anxiety is really about the level of impact. If it's interfering with your ability to live, love, laugh, and learn. There's all sorts of very, very physical symptoms. You feel like you need to run away or maybe fight, or you actually freeze. It's your body getting you ready for fight or flight. They have a lot of stomach aches or headaches. Or somebody might feel like they can't focus, they feel kind of jittery, they feel overwhelmed. Some people might have full-on panic attacks that literally feel like you're having a heart attack.
There really is stigma associated with mental health issues. We don't talk about things like this. You have to be tough and on top of things, and you can't show weakness or admit weakness at work.
There is no shame in being burnt out. I think there's such a cultural norm, particularly in the entrepreneurial community, of keep going. There's work to do. This isn't that big of a deal. I've got this, I can keep going. So I think it really is the minimization or denial. I think friends, family, partners are hesitant to intervene with someone with burnout for fear of coming across as judgmental. And so the partner or friend doesn't want to contribute to the stress by calling out the stress. So often it's a cycle that feeds upon itself, where if nobody's kind of talking about it, the person isn't also getting any help. All we want to do is invite balance. So rather than talk about how hard they're working, how they're never there, maybe we invite, I'd love to have lunch with you today. Is there any way you could meet me for an hour?
I think if you're genuine in your care and concern, I think that's, that comes across, and that's what's honest. You're being honest, you're not being too intrusive. Trust your judgment, trust yourself. If you're really worried about this person, especially if you're worried about safety, then it's important to share that responsibility, talk to people around you, and sometimes you might even need to call the authorities if you're truly worried that you're not going to see that person the next day.
Because it is really helpful to people to feel like somebody cares about them. They're not alone, that you're normalizing it. Like you're approaching this like you would approach other things. Because this is not our standard practice, it kind of goes against social norms, and it feels like we're being intrusive or nosy, to remind yourself that it's actually helpful.
I think often the key is to admit that we're not perfect, that we might be struggling, and show vulnerability in that way, so that we can then actually replenish ourselves by admitting that. Then if we do that and we start rebalancing things, chances are we're gonna come back to our work life in even more of a powerful way. But oftentimes we have to first admit that what we might be doing isn't working.
Good things can come out of situations where people have been in really dark places. And, you know, human history is just full of stories just like that. And you can be the next story like that. And if you find that you're really struggling, go get help and work on it, and you'll get better.
I hope I'm not inducing depression on this group today. I'm trying. It's some of it's pretty heavy, and the comment I wanted to make, is many of you remember that we started this class with Simon Sinek talking about finding your why, and one of the things that all these examples we've just seen, these four people, in almost every case, they were really, really young when they started, right? So their why may not have been real to them. It may not have been truthfully what was in their heart. It might be because they were at MIT and they're really good at math, they did something that would be logical for someone with that background. And every time I watch those, I think of how much you've changed since you were in your 20s or 30s. And some of you may still be in your 30s. You know, it's really like the one guy said, I would like to go back and slap my 18-year-old self right in the face. We do go through so many changes over our life. And if you are able to truly embrace your why are you doing it, I would argue that it's less likely that you will have these kinds of challenges, or maybe not to the degree that some of these people shared. That's my own opinion. There's no proof. I could be totally full of it, but if you're really driven by something, and you'll see this more often in, I think in the nonprofit world, where you run into somebody who's really dedicated to a cause or a purpose. They're trying to do something, impactful. I think you'll find a lot more of that sort of person, that kind of emotional, driven person to help someone else. Whereas sometimes in the business world, it seems like people are trying to help themselves primarily. That's their objective. So I'll throw it open to you all, and happy to respond or share whatever you think.
I think it's a really important issue that people need to realize it's not taboo anymore to talk about depression. Yeah. I personally have major depressive disorder, and I have since I was a young person. And I was recently diagnosed with anxiety as well. And I actually have no trouble talking about it to anybody. I'm an open book to my kids, because I want them to know that if they struggle with these feelings, that it's okay to talk to somebody and to get help. I see a therapist, I'm on antidepressants. And that's just how it is, and entrepreneurs I do think are especially at risk for that. As they pointed out in the videos, because of isolation, and we have this extreme desire to achieve. So I am glad that there's less taboo now about it.
Thank you, Ashley. That's very brave of you, and very, very good of you to share that with the group. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anyone else? Time's dying to talk. I can just see it. He's just like reaching for that microphone. I know this guy.
Dennis, you know me too well, but no, I do appreciate this because as entrepreneurs and just people in general, we're going to go from the mountain to the valley, and there are going to be days or weeks or months that we're struggling, and you start to doubt, and you start to your brain goes into all these negative condensations. But thankfully, if you're persistent, you generally overcome them. But it's wonderful that we've got a group, and I have a great network, much to your credit, because of the people I've met in this class that I can reach out to on various situations, because we've got various levels of comfort that I have these conversations with. And I'm very appreciative to that, because a lot of you guys, as we've had in some of our group meetings, have the same, we have the same struggles, and we're going through the same things, and we're just addressing it from different avenues, if you will. So it's wonderful that we can reach out to each other and feed off each other in positive ways. So thank you so much for that.
Oh, yeah. Anyone else? So this will be controversial, but I feel the need to do this anyway. One of the, go ahead, Ruth. You're more interesting than me. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to chime in with what Tom said, because I so agree that what we do, I think, can be very isolating, especially for those of us who don't have much of a staff. It's kind of just, what we are. And I think it's just so helpful to know that we're not the only ones who just are like, oh my gosh, why are we doing this? Is this really worth it? When you look at how hard we work and all that goes into it, and that there could be a lot easier ways to make more money. But I think if we do this, for most of us, it's probably not about the money, but our whys are very different. And I certainly, as an 18-year-old, would not have even fathomed doing what I'm doing and loving it. That's it.
That's fantastic. I appreciate that. The comment I was going to make before I let everyone go was that, in terms of what's going on in the world as far as solutions for some of these problems, there is the discussion of therapy, there's a discussion of medication, and there's a lot going on in the space, which I know is controversial, but with psychedelics. Which I think are very, very interesting. And I just want to share a story that I heard about this. And so this particular situation was a person who, according to the doctor, said it was the worst case of PTSD the doctor had ever seen. And this was a Marine who came back from Afghanistan or Iraq and just demonstrated this incredible symptoms, and they had never seen anything like it. So he was admitted into a clinical trial out in California. There is a group, I think they're called MAPS, M-A-P-S, and they are a group, they've been doing this stuff since the 1960s, and they are owned or run by a doctor, and they run clinical trials on psychedelic drugs specifically for PTSD as opposed to depression and others. And they actually have succeeded. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the drug. I'm not a big drug guy, but it's actually been approved by the FDA for use in PTSD, that what these guys have figured out. But I just wanted to share this story because it's very, very helpful. So this was the worst case of PTSD they had ever seen. And the stuff this guy was doing was just insane in his community that he'd gone back to. So they got him in this clinical trial, and the day came and he showed up at the office, and this is in California. And the way they do it, they have like this couch, and you lay down on the couch, and then they administer this this dose of whatever this stuff is. And it's a plant. It's not even a chemical. I mean, it's a plant like a Ruska. I can never remember this stuff, but it's some particular drug, and I will look it up and post it. So, and the room has 4 doctors in it, and they basically sit down and they're there for the person. And there is some talk therapy. It just depends what the person wants to do. So this guy comes in, lays on the couch. They give him his dose of whatever it was, and he lays down, and he's got like a cloth over his eyes and all this kind of stuff. And he lays there for about 15 minutes, not saying a word, not just, and they thought, oh my God, this guy's catatonic, you know, whatever. So all of a sudden he reaches up and he pulls off the mask, and he takes off the earphones, and he sits up and he looks at the doctor. He goes, I got it. I know exactly what's what, and I'm fine. I don't need any more of this, and I'm done. So, but the follow-up of that is he was done, and he has been an incredible case study of success. He's now one of the leading counselors in this space in the whole United States. It's an amazing story. But they finally got him to come back, and he said, what in the hell happened in there? What do you mean you got it? He goes, well, when I went under, all of my buddies from Afghanistan showed up, and they got in a circle around me, and they were mad as hell at me because he was the only survivor out of this squad. And he said they were screaming at me like they died, and he was there supposed to be doing stuff for them and for their families, and all you did was act like the fool, and what the hell's wrong with you? Get your shit together. And he said, okay. And that was it. The fellows came to him in his whatever this psychedelic trip was, and that was it. So I think that kind of stuff is really, really cool. And I think that there may be therapies and things coming down the road that are going to help, because we really have an epidemic in mental health. I don't know all the statistics, and every time I look it up, it causes me to get depressed. But the number of people that are dealing with depression, number of kids in particular, really got my attention. The suicide rate, I mean, come on, you know, it's enough is enough. It's not working well enough, I should say. So I'm a big advocate of finding solutions that work. And so if you run across some of this stuff, and you know, you hear about magic mushrooms and LSD, all this other kind of stuff, look for it from places like Johns Hopkins and Yale. I have a family member who went into a clinical trial at Yale with essentially an incurable disease, and he was treated with the psilocybin mushrooms, and no, it did not cure what was wrong with him, but boy, has it made a difference in his quality of life and his perspective about all of the stuff that happens to him. And you know, he went and did this under Yale's protocol. And I kept asking him, you know, what happened? What happened? He goes, I'll tell you when I'm ready. I'll tell you when I'm ready. So we were visiting him, and this is my brother-in-law. We were visiting him, and he looked at me. He goes, go get the bottle of Jack Daniels. Let's talk. So it was his wife and me and my wife and I, and we sat down and listened to this story of what he experienced and what he learned and what he resolved. It's the most epic tale I have ever heard in my life. It was mind-blowing, literally. So there is a lot of cool stuff going on in this space, and I hope that the future means fewer people have to deal with this kind of stuff, including all of you, and including me and my family also. So I did want to share that. I had no idea why I felt the need to share that, but I think about that stuff, so I decided that I would. So anybody want to add to it or chat about it? And
I think the
of course,
medicine
any of
is
you
called.
feel- I'm sorry, I missed that. What's that, Ashley?
I think the treatment you're thinking of is called ayahuasca. For the soldiers.
I don't think, I know that name. It wasn't that. It was something else, but it's very similar in that same kind of realm. And
Okay.
it has been approved by the FDA for treatment, whatever this drug is, and I'll find it. I'll post it. But it's been approved by the FDA for use. And what's interesting about the FDA approval, the only way you can get a prescription is you have to be a client of this group. In other words, they have been doing this for 30 years, and the FDA did not want untrained people using this stuff. So you have to be a patient of this. It's called MAPS, MAPS. I think they're headquartered in Santa Cruz, California. And they have this process that they've figured out. And that's the approval of the FDA. First time ever, the FDA has approved a treatment and mandated that you see a particular provider. That's never happened before. But they have had quite a success with PTSD. All right. Well, thanks everybody for sharing and for dealing with this touchy subject. And I look forward to everyone again on Monday. See you
Thank you,
later.
Dennis.
Yeah.